Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. Last week, South Korea and the United States finalized a landmark tariff agreement, one that reshapes the economic playing field between the two allies. The deal includes a massive $350 billion Korean investment in strategic U.S. sectors such as shipbuilding, semiconductors, nuclear energy, and biotechnology. While some industries gained favorable terms, like semiconductors retaining the most favored nation status, others, like the automotive sector, now face a steep 15% tariff. The Lee Jae-myung administration touts it as a strategic compromise, but questions remain about the long-term impacts on Korean industries and how this fundamentally alters the existing FTA structure. So today we break down what's at stake, who stands to gain, and what Korea should prepare for next. And for this, we connect to Song Soo-young, Professor of Business and Economics at Chungang University. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, good evening to you. Thank you for inviting me.
And also joining us from Montclair is Lee Sun-hyung, Assistant Professor of Economics at Montclair State University. Good to see you, Professor.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Now, let's start a discussion with Professor Song. So, the Korean government, of course, domestic industries, and even foreign institutional investors are calling the latest outcome of the South Korea-U.S. tariff negotiations as a solid result. We'd also want to hear your evaluation of this agreement, Professor Song.
Yeah, first of all, it turns out to be a success, I think. The reason is originally it was set up as a 25% by Trump. Of course, it is a kind of some exaggerated threat against to induce, to squeeze out some favorable agreement from Korea. But however, 15%, because when I see the outcomes of the tariff negotiation between the US and the EU, as well as the US and Japan, I think 15% would be most likely to be outcome. The reason is because Japan has requested a condition for their exports to US at least should be as equal as the same tariff when the other countries have enjoyed for the lower tariff. To that, because of that, I think 15% would be most likely. And what is to me, what is a surprise was Taiwan has received assigned as a 20%. I think this is some kind of Trump think of some scapegoating of Taiwan to induce some favorable conditions out of the negotiation between U.S. and China. And in the capital market, particularly on the first day of August, we have seen the 3.88% decrease of the Kospi index, which is the largest drop in the Asian countries, Asian economy index. But however, today we have seen the 0.9% recovery, and actually the year-to-date Kospi index increase is very astonishing and very impressive, which is almost 37% of the increase out of the start of the 2,373 Kospi index, which was the very lowest point recently. So, and the trend clearly shows there's some gradual increase. This will be reflected in the Kospi index. And the perturbation of turmoil in the first day of August actually is like some foreign investors because of due to the concern about United States job openings and labor turnover data has been adjusted dramatically. So that may reflect the conditions of the U.S. economy is not as good as expected or maybe worse than forecasted. That's why we have seen the outflow of foreign investors in the Korean market, but it recovers. And in the future, we are going to see what will be played out for this negotiation because no pact has been written yet, and we have a long way to go. So we'll wait and see how it will be played out in between the U.S. and Korea tariff negotiation.
Right, so definitely we'll really have to wait for the details to come.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to the investment scale, when looking at the volume, South Korea has pledged $350 billion, while Japan and the EU committed 550 and 600 billion US dollars respectively. Now, we want to invite Professor Lee into the conversation. So given Korea's GDP and overall economic size, do you think this $350 billion investment scale is reasonable?
Well, I think it's difficult to say what's an appropriate level of investment in this instance. So instead of looking at the proportionality to economic size, GDP, or other macroeconomic variables, we need to look at the strong commitment and the signal that the Korean government has sent in this negotiation deal. I think the Professor Song made a clear remark that this is a negotiation framework. What that means to us is that it's not a final deal. It's something that will be drawn out and also negotiated out in the upcoming months. And so it's a possibility that additional pledges are coming forward in terms of some companies, including Hyundai and Samsung, those two major multinational corporations, could actually bring more strategic and important integration to the U.S. economy. So it's not about the size of the economy where EU has 27 countries with $600 billion and Korea with $350 billion. So in that case, the U.S. does not see this as an inferior amount. Instead, this is more about how we can move forward in terms of the strategic alliance and how Korea can be viewed as a partner in this negotiation deal.
Right, so it's definitely more than just face value, a lot of other values that carry with it. Now, let's also turn to some key sectors, delve into that. The shipping industry definitely is drawing the most attention out of this deal. Of the total $350 billion in U.S.-bound investment, $150 billion is allocated to this specific sector. Professor Song, how do you view this, the potential risks of the so-called MOSCA project for South Korea's shipbuilding industry?
I think in MOSCA project, there is not much risk associated with it. But out of the $350 billion investment fund, I have seen that two very contrast opinion or remarks about it because the Lutnick, the Secretary of Commerce of the U.S., has mentioned the profit and the outcome out of these funds will be delivered to the U.S. people, 90% of the profit. But the White House Secretary, I'm not sure. What is the Caroline Levitt? She has mentioned that this will be the profit could be used for make up the U.S. budget deficit. So this is a very to me it is a shock. But actually, so that's why we have not seen that any pact or any written statement has been made yet. So it means there is some associated risk because how it will be written down in the future. But at least I'm sure the negotiation team from South Korea must assure that the profit or the outcome of this fund should be used for the mutual benefit of the U.S. people or consumers, as well as investors from South Korea. And that is kind of a governance structure should be determined. And then we need our negotiation teams should make very elaborate efforts to improve the conditions. And also this clearly we have a leverage against the U.S. is because U.S. shipping build shipbuilding industry is almost out of hands. I mean, they have no capacity to take care of the old ships, and even for at least the naval ships should be sent to Korea to take care of makeover. So to that regards, we make use of this leverage to ensure that the outcome of the investment fund should be used for the mutual benefit of US and Korea.
Right. So there had been definitely conflicting statements regarding where the profits will go, and we'll have to see how that proceeds, that negotiation proceeds. But we will hope for mutual benefits on that front. But speaking of targeted investments, $200 billion is being channeled into semiconductors, nuclear power, secondary batteries, and biotechnology through a strategic industry investment fund. And the presidential office says it has built in safeguards by restricting participation to industries with real potential for U.S.-Korea collaboration. So if Korean firms join as strategic partners, Professor Lee, what benefits or ripple effects could we expect from that?
Well, I think we can look at a couple of advantages from this type of directional earmark understanding of the fund, where we can now see that companies are not going into uncertain or low return investment or sectors. So Korean firms are more willing to invest and pledge a higher FDI project, that's foreign direct investment project, toward the United States. And also keep in mind that this type of the fund is really related to reducing dependency on China from the US perspective. So I think the key advantage here is, from the Korean perspective, is that these companies can now be a substitute for a key critical industry and also technology in lieu of the Chinese influence for the United States. So we can see that these Korean companies can have some high ground compared to other nations. Now, in terms of the implications of this, obviously, Korean companies can benefit from increased high supply chain integration. What that means to them is that now they can have a joint venture in R&D projects, and also they can be eligible for federal and subnational incentives, including taxes and subsidies from local governments, especially state government subsidies, where these investment projects will be actually established. And that could include a Republican strong support, where most of the Trump administration support base is there, has such a high implication. So in the end, also we need to look at the extended market opportunities where Korean firms can actually have an increase in profitability in the long run.
So being a strategic partner could open doors well beyond financial returns as well. Now, let's also address the auto industry. Tariffs there will jump from 0% to 15%, and the Korean government had pushed for 12.5% until the final stages, but stopped short. Professor Song, what will this 15% tariff actually mean in real terms for South Korea's car manufacturers, and what strategies might help soften the blow a little bit?
Yeah, clearly the 15% of tariff is imposed, and then the Korean auto industry lose the competitiveness against some other competing, particularly the U.S. domestic car industries. But at least we have the same condition with who are our arch rival is Japanese car industry. So at least we are in the same starting line. Then what matters most is what would be the eventual or the effective tariff rate. So in order to reduce the effective tariff rate, Hyundai and Kia, our auto industry, is already promised to build some parts or the cars manufacturing firms in the U.S. And also, not details of negotiation is still underway, but I think at least we need some kind of conditions to guarantee some kind of tariff exemption, such as, for example, the parts of the auto parts has been used and produced within Korea is, for example, 60% not from China or other countries. Then we should be eligible for some tariff exemption. that is another, because this is a very detailed negotiation should be underway. So that is very difficult to say clearly right now. But at least we should make efforts to reduce the effective tariff rate. And on the other hand, Professor Lee has mentioned very much about detailed and wide range of the industry. However, particularly I think the President Trump's perspective, what is important to him is his winning in the national election, which will be held in the next year, November. So to that regard, what matters most to him would be the inflation of the necessities of this product. So rather than these very advanced industry products such as semiconductor, nuclear power, or secondary batteries and the biotech, I don't think much of them is in his President Trump's mind. I think what he is most concerned right now is Walmart price in the United States, because that could affect the U.S. voters' mind, and then he may lose. He is afraid of losing the midterm election. So to that regard, I think much of the leverage should be exploited by the South Korean negotiation officials to take out the most out of the Trump.
Right, especially when we break down into the details of the deal. Now, let's also touch upon semiconductors, which is, of course, South Korea's most vital exports item. It will receive the most favored nation tariff treatment, and semiconductor exports reached, in fact, a record high for the month of July. Professor Lee, do you think this momentum could have influenced the final tariff deal?
Definitely so. And I think we have to be very careful about our narrative about our exporting to United States in terms of semiconductors. As you know, we had the largest semiconductor export in last July, but that's problematic from the Korean side, because if you recall that reciprocal tariff rate formula back in March, it was US trade deficit to Korea divided by the US import from Korea, and that entire ratio divided by 2. And so if you see an increase in import in semiconductors from Korea to the United States, it is possible that the US may increase and demand higher reciprocal tariff rates in the future negotiation meetings. So I don't think it's wise for the Korean government to actually advertise that. Instead, the Korean government could emphasize in the increased role of these companies and the necessary role of the semiconductors for the US firms. For example, Samsung Electronics has recently clinched a deal to supply semiconductors for Tesla by the end of 2033. So what that means is that now there is a collaboration between Samsung and Tesla in US manufacturing and exporting of Tesla cars to the rest of the world. That type of narrative is an important story for the Korean government to show the integral part of the Korean technology in US firms' manufacturing capabilities.
Now, staying with trade sensitives, both countries, the U.S. and South Korea, have agreed not to further open South Korea's agricultural and livestock markets, including rice and beef as well. But concerns are still remaining that the U.S. could still push for more access. Professor Song, how do you see such kind of risk?
Yeah, this issue is clearly related to what I just mentioned earlier, because this beef and livestock products and agricultural products, clearly President Trump is a little bit concerned about the election, and then the Midwest states that will have in the national election that could be affect 35 seats of the Senate seats in the U.S. So as long as this is my guess, but I strongly believe that Trump is mostly concerned about the votings in the Midwest states and the Senate seats, then he is going to push some this kind of the opening of the agricultural product market in the Korea and push the Korea to purchase more product. So in order to counter these offers, rather than blocking, I think we should take some alternative circumventing way, which means that I would like to give the subsidy to the Korean farmers or peasants while allowing the US products to come to Korean market for the time being, which means there is a limit of the time. So within 1 or 2 years, just opening the agricultural product market and then block. That would be the much better way to overcome and satisfying the Trump's demand and overcoming these obstacles and protecting the Korean market and Korean economy further.
Professor, I just want to make sure I got the idea. So open the agriculture market temporarily and then
yes.
Block it again? Is that what I'm getting?
That's my suggestion. And how to when the President Trump has pushed so strongly, then rather than facing the brunt of the Trump's demand and facing the further increase of the tariff, it would be some circumventing and some alternative way to avoid the direct collision with President Trump.
All right. Thank you for your opinion on that. But I'm afraid we'll have to conclude our discussion here at this point tonight. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights, Professor Song.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
And Professor Lee, we appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.